I didn't fall in love with Michael all at once. It was slow, gentle, the way sunlight creeps across a wooden floor in the morning, barely noticeable until it's everywhere. I was 24, new to the city, fresh off a heartbreak that I pretended hadn't getted me. I'd just started a job I wasn't sure I was qualified for and was living in a studio apartment that smelled like old radiator heat and lemon dish soap. I was tired all the time. I missed my mom. I was trying too hard to seem like a woman who had it all figured out. Michael worked down the hall in the same building. Graphic design, freelance, mostly quiet. We passed in the hallway a few times, and I noticed the way he always held the door open an extra beat longer than necessary, like he knew I was coming even when I hadn't made a sound. He smiled with his whole face. Not flirtatious, just kind. The first time he made me tea was after a long, miserable week where everything seemed to go wrong. My bus was late, my boss was terse, my stomach wouldn't stop aching. I didn't tell anyone, hadn't even complained out loud, but Michael must have seen it in my eyes. He knocked on my door that Friday evening, holding a mismatched mug that said, "World's okayest artist." It was steaming, fragrant, not coffee, tea. Chamomile, honey, lemon. "I thought maybe this would help," he said, and handed it over without waiting for a thank you. I didn't cry, not then, but something softened. I sat on the floor after he left, legs crossed under me like a kid again, and held that mug in both hands like it was a small animal I'd forgotten how to care for. The tea wasn't even that good. Too much honey, not enough lemon. But it was the first time in months someone had done something purely for me. Not because they wanted something, not because they had to, just because they noticed. Looking back, that was Michael's way. He noticed things, quietly, without announcing it, without keeping score. He remembered which side of the bed I slept on, how I liked my socks folded, not rolled, that I hated cold butter on toast. He noticed the things that didn't make it onto calendars or social media posts. And I, in all my noise and ambition, didn't realize how rare that was. Sometimes I wonder how different my life might have been if I had taken that cup of tea as the gift it truly was. If I'd understood then what it meant to be seen, really seen, and still cared for. But I didn't. I drank it, smiled, said thanks. And then I went back to trying to become someone worth impressing without realizing I already had someone who was impressed just to know me.
Michael wasn't the kind of man who filled a room. He filled a silence. There's a difference. He never had to raise his voice to be heard. He never interrupted. He listened like it was an art, and he'd spent years perfecting it. At first, I found that comforting, even romantic. In a world of men who competed to be the loudest, most confident, most certain, Michael simply was. We'd go out with friends, my friends mostly, and while others joked and told stories and talked over one another, he'd sit beside me, his hand resting gently on my knee under the table. He didn't need to perform. He just wanted to be close, present. And I'd beam, thinking, this is what emotional safety feels like. He didn't fill silence with noise. He filled it with presence, with calm, with his eyes focused on mine, like I was the only person who existed in the moment. In the beginning, it felt like a gift. A man who didn't want to overpower me, who wasn't trying to win me, just walk beside me. But here's the uncomfortable truth. I didn't know what to do with quiet love. I'd grown up on movies and books and TV shows where passion looked like chaos. Raised voices, grand gestures, dramatic reconciliations in the rain. I thought love was supposed to hurt a little. That if it didn't come with fireworks, it probably wasn't real. Michael's love was not fireworks. It was a steady flame, a candle in the dark, and I didn't understand that kind of fire yet. At night, he'd read while I scrolled through my phone, one arm always extended behind my shoulders, absent-mindedly rubbing circles into my back. When I couldn't sleep, he'd hum. Never a full song, Just soft melodies that sounded half remembered, like something from childhood, like lullabies without words. He brought me flowers not when I was sad, but when I had a good day. To make it even better, he wrote little notes and left them in my planner. Don't forget how loved you are. You're not alone in this. You don't have to earn rest. At first, I saved them, pressed them into a drawer like petals I didn't want to wilt. But over time, I stopped reading them as closely. I'd find one and think, that's sweet, then toss it aside. I didn't realize the slow drip of ungratefulness that was starting to stain everything he gave. Michael was the kind of man who didn't demand space. He just made room for me in his life and hoped I'd do the same. But I was too young, too foolish, too eager to feel something dramatic to recognize how rare it was to have a love that didn't need fixing or chasing. A love that didn't keep me guessing, that didn't punish me with silence or manipulation. A love that simply asked, "Are you okay?" and waited for the honest answer. Quiet love doesn't announce itself. It doesn't dazzle in the moment. It settles in your bones slowly, patiently, until one day you realize it's the only kind that ever truly lasted. But by the time I figured that out, I'd already begun looking for noise again.
It didn't happen all at once. Control never does. It creeps in slowly, disguised as care. I didn't wake up one morning and decide I wanted to be the center of everything. I just got used to being prioritized, loved, maybe a little too well. Over time, Michael's world started orbiting around me like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I didn't question it. I let it happen. I welcomed it. At first, it was little things. He stopped scheduling Sunday hikes with his friends because that was my grocery day. He used to play guitar most evenings, but I complained once about the noise echoing off the apartment walls, and he never picked it up again. I hadn't meant it as a demand, just a comment. But with Michael, comments stuck like commandments. And so I became the center, quietly, softly, without even trying. If he wanted Thai food, but I felt like Italian, we got Italian. If he planned a weekend trip, but I seemed tired, we stayed home. Every time he deferred to my needs, I told myself this was what partnership looked like: compromise, consideration, emotional generosity. And yet, deep down, a darker part of me, a younger, more selfish part, started mistaking all that deference for lack of opinion, lack of drive, lack of depth. I convinced myself I was helping our relationship by guiding it, shaping it, keeping us on track. I took charge of our plans, our finances, even our furniture. I rearranged our living room one Saturday while he was out getting groceries. And when he came home and paused for a beat too long at the sight of the couch in a new spot, I snapped, "Do you not like it?" And he smiled, said, "No, it looks good." And that was that. But that pause, that tiny moment of hesitation, it stayed with me longer than it should have. It made me wonder, did he actually have opinions? Or was he just a mirror, reflecting whatever I wanted to see? That's when the seed of doubt took root. At the time, I told myself I was just paying attention, that it was normal to want balance in a relationship. But balance means two people standing side by side, not one quietly shrinking to fit into the other's frame. I wish I could say I saw it then, that I stopped myself, that I said, "Hey, Michael, I want you to speak up more. I want you to keep the parts of you that don't revolve around me." But I didn't. I kept letting him disappear into my preferences. And the worst part, I began resenting him for it. It's a strange, cruel thing to resent someone for loving you too much, for giving you exactly what you said you wanted.
I began testing him, subtly, suggesting things I knew he didn't care for just to see if he'd finally say no. He never did. And every time he said yes, I felt something between annoyance and guilt, a flash of disappointment that he didn't fight me, that he didn't draw a line, that he didn't say, "This part of me is non-negotiable." It should have been a sign, a warning, a chance to stop and ask myself why I needed to push, why his peacefulness started feeling like absence, why I was beginning to equate love with resistance instead of respect. But I wasn't ready to face that. So I kept pulling. And Michael, in all his quiet love, kept following.
They don't tell you what happens after the climb, after the degrees are earned, the job's landed, the apartment decorated just right. They don't tell you what happens when there's nothing left to chase, and the silence settles in. At 26, I had what most people my age said they wanted: a partner who loved me without question, a stable home, a decent career. I didn't worry about rent. I didn't worry about heartbreak. I didn't worry about drama or betrayal or games. Michael had removed all that from my life with a kind of gentle competence I never thought to question, until I did. I should have felt lucky. I was lucky. But somewhere in that safety, I started to feel stuck. It's hard to explain to someone who's never felt it. That specific kind of guilt that comes from being unhappy when you have everything you asked for. It's not loud, not sharp. It's quiet, heavy, like humidity before a storm. Michael came home every evening with the same warm smile. "How was your day?" he'd ask, and I'd answer, sometimes honestly, sometimes not. He'd sit on the couch with me, legs tucked under him like a boy, and listen to me complain about the printer at work or the woman in HR who microwave fish. And he'd listen, really listen. And yet, I found myself irritated by his contentment. He was fine. Too fine. He didn't talk about promotions or big risks or passion projects. He liked his job, a simple design firm where he made logos for bakeries and dentists, and the occasional tech startup. He was good at it, but there was no hunger behind it, no ambition clawing at the walls, no dissatisfaction driving him forward. And I had started to think that made him small. Wasn't that what we were told to want? Drive, hustle, vision. But every time I looked at Michael, I saw a man perfectly at peace with a simple life. It made me feel like I was running on a treadmill next to someone who'd already stopped. Not out of exhaustion, but because he decided the view was fine where he was. And maybe it was. But I didn't want to stand still. I wanted more. Even if I couldn't name what more looked like. There was one night that sticks in my memory. A Saturday. We'd just gotten back from a brunch I didn't enjoy, but pretended to. I was folding laundry while Michael cleaned the kitchen, humming to himself, off-key as always. He looked up at me and said, "You know, I really love this life we've built." And I nodded, smiled, but something inside me cracked. Because in that moment, I didn't feel the same. I didn't love the routine. I didn't love the ease. I didn't love that nothing surprised me anymore. Not even the way he said, "I love you." The same tone, the same timing, like clockwork. I wanted to feel unsettled, stirred, something. I told myself I was young, that I hadn't lived enough to already be this settled. I told myself Michael deserved someone who appreciated the quiet life he built, not someone secretly screaming inside it. But I didn't say any of that out loud. Instead, I kissed him on the cheek, helped him dry the dishes, and wondered how long I could keep pretending I was still climbing when I'd already hit a plateau.
They didn't tell me to leave him, not at first. That's the thing about these kinds of influences. They come in whispers, not shouts. It started subtly.
Over drinks, over text threads, over hair appointments, and Saturday brunches with too much champagne and not enough food. The kinds of moments where honesty masquerades as care, where concern slips between compliments. "Michael's sweet," Paige said once, sipping her third mimosa. "But don't you ever feel like he's just too agreeable?" I laughed, brushed it off. "He's just easygoing." "Sure. Or maybe he's just avoiding conflict. That's not the same thing." I didn't argue. I never did. Not because I agreed, but because deep down, something about the question landed. Megan was worse. She was the youngest in our group, loud, confident, serially in and out of relationships. She'd flash dating app profiles at me like magazine covers. Ambitious men, tall men, adventurous men, MBA students, engineers, guys with six-packs and world maps behind them in their selfies. "Just saying," she'd grin, "if you ever wanted to see what's out there." Then there was Hadley, my sister. Wild, free, exhausting in the way only an older sister can be. She was the one who really got under my skin. "You settled," she said one night when we were up too late. "You met a nice guy early and confused safety with love." "I didn't settle," I said defensively, but I didn't believe myself. Hadley pressed on. "You're smart, you're funny, you're gorgeous. You could be with someone who pushes you, who brings out your fire. But Michael, he just folds himself around you." At first, I defended him. Of course I did. I said all the right things, that he was kind, that he loved me well, that he remembered the little things, the way I liked my eggs, my favorite kind of tea, how I hated loud clocks in quiet rooms, that he made me feel safe. But the more I said it, the more it sounded like I was reciting a script, like I was justifying, not celebrating. Because that's what they do to you, these voices. They don't tear down the house, they loosen one brick at a time, until you wake up one day and the walls no longer feel sturdy, and you don't know if they ever were. They started asking questions I didn't have answers to. What's Michael passionate about, besides you? What's his 5-year plan? If you weren't in the picture, what would his life look like? I didn't know. I'd never asked. Or maybe I'd never cared. I thought it was enough that he loved me, that he chose me every day without hesitation. But now I wondered, was that devotion or dependency? And that wondering became a seed. A quiet one. One I didn't water on purpose, but one that grew anyway. When I told Paige that Michael had started packing my lunch for work, she raised her eyebrows and said, "Wow, that's sweet," or codependent. When I mentioned that he let me pick the movie every time, Megan laughed. "That man needs a spine." When I shared that Michael turned down a weekend trip with his college buddies because I had a big presentation Monday, Hadley said, "Does he have a life, like outside of you?" Each comment felt small in the moment, but together they formed something heavier, a pattern, a mirror I didn't want to look into. I started to see him differently, not because he had changed, but because I had started measuring him against standards he never signed up for. And here's the worst part, I started believing them, believing I deserved someone more assertive, more ambitious, more manly in that frustrating, socially conditioned way we're taught to admire. Someone who didn't fold so easily. Someone who didn't ask me what I wanted for dinner, but just cooked something bold and spicy and unexpected. I convinced myself that love should come with challenge, with resistance, that maybe Michael's constant yes meant something was missing. The truth, I was bored. Not with him, really, with myself. But it was easier to project that restlessness onto him than look at the hollow places inside me. And my friends, my well-meaning, modern, independent, wine-drunk friends, gave me permission to confuse boredom with insight. They said I was waking up. They said I was growing. They said I was becoming who I was meant to be. But none of them asked what it would cost.
You don't call it settling out loud. Not at first. You tell yourself other stories, softer ones, like, I need time to grow, or maybe we're just at different places in life. But deep down, you're already looking down at something you once looked up to. At night, Michael would make us tea. Still, even when I didn't ask for it anymore. He'd ask about my day, even when I gave one-word answers. He'd suggest dinner ideas, and I'd shrug, distracted, scrolling. He never complained, and that was the problem. I'd started to confuse peace with passivity. A year earlier, I would have said, I'm lucky. He doesn't raise his voice, doesn't belittle me, doesn't disappear emotionally when things get hard. But now I saw the same things and thought, why won't he challenge me? Why doesn't he push back when I get cold, distant, sarcastic? I wanted a reaction, and when I didn't get one, I translated his calm as apathy. The very things I once cherished had become evidence of something broken. His patience now felt like weakness, his steady love like a trap, his predictability like a lack of depth. I started comparing him to men I didn't even know, men on dating apps with crisp suits and crooked grins, whose bios boasted about climbing Kilimanjaro or building startups, men who'd probably forget my birthday but had vision, had drive, at least in theory. Michael had never wanted to climb a mountain. He wanted to build a life, a quiet, intentional one, with me. And I started seeing that dream as small. I told myself I was outgrowing him. I told myself it wasn't his fault, that we'd simply become different people, that I was evolving and he wasn't keeping up. It sounded noble, wise, emotionally mature, but it was just a cover for the truth. I was uncomfortable with how loved I was. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? But there's a certain kind of discomfort that comes from being fully seen and loved anyway, from not needing to perform, from not being chased or begged or earned. I didn't know how to sit in that kind of love without trying to twist it into something harder, something more dramatic, because that's what love had always looked like in the movies. Pain, passion, problems. And Michael, he was none of that. He was ease. I started poking holes in everything. He doesn't have hobbies anymore, I told myself. But he did. I just didn't like them. He used to play guitar, sketch in his notebook, fix old furniture he found on the side of the road. But somewhere along the way, I made small, passive-aggressive comments about the noise, the mess, how it was a little cluttered for my taste. So he stopped. And when he stopped, I told myself he'd become dull, settled, as if I hadn't carefully sanded down all the edges myself. The worst part? He thanked me for it. Thanked me for helping him be more focused, more mature, more adult. I looked at the man I had reshaped and thought, where did he go? And yet, I never questioned the hands that did the reshaping. I started daydreaming, not of cheating, not even of leaving, just of more spontaneity, more disagreement, more wildness. I thought maybe if Michael would just push back once, show a spark of anger or desire or demand, I'd feel something again. Instead, he asked if I wanted to go to the new Vietnamese place that opened down the street. He told me he'd booked us a weekend away. He asked if I wanted him to bring in the laundry because the forecast said rain. He kept being Michael. And I, slowly, quietly, began to wish he wasn't.
There was no fight, no screaming, no dramatic betrayal. Just silence. The kind that settles over you like dust on furniture no one touches anymore. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary in every visible way. Michael left for work like always, kissed my forehead, asked if I needed anything, said he'd grab groceries on the way home. I nodded, barely looking up from my laptop. I already knew I wouldn't be there when he got back. My suitcase was already half packed. I'd started the night before, quietly, deliberately,
folding clothes with a kind of mechanical calm that didn't match the storm inside me. Every shirt I laid in the bag felt like a betrayal. Every pair of socks a goodbye I couldn't say out loud. I wasn't running to someone. That would have been easier to justify. I was running to a question. Who am I without him? Because the truth, the ugly truth, was that I had never stood alone. Not really. I had jumped from my parents' house to college dorms to Michael's apartment. I'd built my identity on being someone's daughter, someone's girlfriend, someone's other half. I wanted to know what it felt like to be just me. I left a note, because I couldn't face him. A few soft sentences that said nothing real. I need time. I need space. This isn't your fault. Please don't blame yourself. Lies cloaked in kindness. Words that sounded gentle but cut all the same. By 4 p.m., my car was loaded. I'd taken almost everything that belonged to me. Clothes, books, toiletries, but left behind small things. A mug he bought me, a scarf he once wrapped around my shoulders when I forgot mine, a framed photo of us in autumn, golden leaves in the background, my head leaning against his shoulder. I left those things like they were crumbs I might follow back home, but I never meant to. I was closing the trunk when I heard his car pull up. Early. Of course he was early. He always tried to surprise me on Tuesdays with flowers or my favorite pastry. I felt my stomach fall. He stepped out of the car slowly, his keys still dangling from one hand, confused. Then he saw the suitcase, the open trunk, the half-empty apartment behind me, and the note, folded on the kitchen table, fluttering slightly from the breeze through the door I hadn't bothered to close.
He walked past me without a word. Read the note. I watched his eyes move, line by line, then stop. His fingers trembled slightly as he folded it back up. He turned to me, and in that moment, he looked smaller. Not because he was weak, because he was trying not to shatter. "Zoe," he said, voice quiet, barely audible. "Please, don't do this." I didn't answer. He stepped forward, his face pale, eyes wide like he was trying to read me, trying to find the woman who used to smile when he made her tea. But I wasn't smiling. "Whatever it is," he said, "whatever's wrong, we can fix it." Then, and I'll never forget this, he dropped to his knees. Right there in the driveway, asphalt under him, autumn air thick around us, hands clasped like he was praying, like he was begging the universe to rewind. "Please," he whispered, "please don't go." And I felt nothing. Not sorrow, not heartbreak, just cold, sharp certainty. I looked at him, on his knees, and all I could think was, this is why I have to leave. This is exactly it. Because in that moment, his willingness to break himself open to keep me, it didn't move me. It embarrassed me. I told myself I needed strength. I told myself I needed space to become someone bigger, brighter, braver. But in truth, I just didn't want to look at a man who loved me more than I knew how to handle. I closed the trunk, walked around him, got in the car. He didn't stand. He just stayed there, knees to pavement, shoulders flumped. The kind of posture you only make when your whole life feels like it's falling through your hands. I reversed slowly, drove away. No music, no tears, just the sound of my own breath, shallow and unsure. In the rearview mirror, he was still kneeling. And I told myself that leaving was brave, that someday I'd thank myself for choosing growth over comfort. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't admit, was that I hadn't chosen growth. I had chosen absence. And I had no idea how heavy it would become. For the first few weeks, I told myself I had made the right choice. And for a while, I believed it. Freedom has a taste, and at first, it's sweet, brisk, like cold air hitting your lungs after you've been inside too long. I slept late, bought new sheets, white linen, minimalist.
I rearranged my parents' guest room until it looked nothing like the room I cried in as a teenager. I made playlists, read self-help books with titles like Becoming Her and Radical Clarity. I took walks without telling anyone where I was going. No text to answer, no "when will you be home?" It felt like breathing for the first time in years. I told myself, this is healing. I got a job quickly, admin at a local nonprofit. Nothing glamorous, but it gave me structure, purpose, a new start. My coworkers were chatty and energetic. Nobody knew me as part of a couple. Nobody said, "How's Michael?" Nobody asked if I was okay in the soft Michael kind of way that made you accidentally cry. It was refreshing. I was light. I was empty. But I called it free. I started going out more. Drinks with Hadley, coffee with Paige, brunch with Megan and her rotating list of maybe boyfriends. They praised me constantly. "You look radiant. You seem so much lighter. You're glowing." And maybe I was. Glowing from the adrenaline of escape, but not from joy. At night, when I came home to silence, I told myself I was reclaiming my space. I drank wine in bed and watched foreign films I never used to have patience for. I lit candles. I bought indoor plants. I made quinoa bowls I never would have cooked when Michael was around. Not because he disliked them, but because he would have offered to help, and I didn't want to share the task. I kept saying, "This is who I'm meant to be." I didn't admit that I still flinched every time I passed the tea aisle at the grocery store, or that I skipped over certain songs on my playlist because they reminded me of slow mornings, the kind Michael used to turn into sacred rituals with jazz and French toast. I told myself reinvention required distance, that I couldn't grow with someone holding my hand, that I had to be alone to be whole. So I blocked his number, deleted our photos, unfollowed his social media. I even changed my email signature. No more best, just my name, clean and cool. I started writing in lowercase on purpose, like it proved something, like I was more creative now, more spontaneous, more me. But every so often, when I passed couples in coffee shops, when I heard someone laugh the way Michael used to, when I saw a man carry groceries for his partner without being asked, something inside me wavered. Just for a second. A flicker. But I buried it. I told myself that part of me, the part that loved Michael, belonged to an old version of me, a version I'd outgrown, a version that was small, dependent, soft. But soft isn't a sin. I just hadn't learned that yet. So I kept pretending that reinvention meant detachment. I kept chasing stillness through motion, new clothes, new habits, new Instagram captions with quotes about self-love that I didn't fully believe. And through it all, I kept telling myself, this is progress, even when it felt like loss. It didn't come from him, of course not. He'd finally stopped reaching out by then. I made sure of that. It came through my mom. As Saturday morning, I was helping her organize the garage, boxes of old ornaments, faded camping chairs, memories we hadn't touched in years. We were sipping lukewarm coffee from mismatched mugs when she dropped it, casual as anything. "I ran into Michael's mom at the grocery store," she said, brushing dust off a plastic wreath. "She said he's doing really well." I blinked. "Oh," I said, pretending to focus on detangling a string of old Christmas lights. "Yeah," said he started therapy, reconnected with some old friends. He even picked up his guitar again, said he's playing at some open mic nights now. My hands stilled. Something in my chest twisted. Not sharp, not loud, just a tightness, like my ribs had shrunk a size too small. I smiled, or tried to. "That's good," I said, forcing my voice into something light. But inside, 1,000 questions screamed at once. Therapy? Old friends? Music? Where was all of this when I needed him to grow? I didn't ask for details. I didn't press. My mom moved on to talking about how dusty the wreaths were, and I let her. But something inside me had cracked. Hairline, but deep. A fault line. The rest of the day passed like I was walking underwater. I smiled when I was supposed to, nodded, laughed once or twice. But in the back of my mind, a new story was writing itself. One where Michael was flourishing, and I wasn't in it. That night, alone in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, holding my phone like it was a bomb I didn't know how to defuse. I'd blocked his number, unfollowed everything, but I opened the search bar anyway. Typed his name. His profile was private, no posts, but the profile picture had changed. No longer the one of him in the park, the one I took. Now it was a candid shot. Him on a hiking trail, smiling, a guitar strapped to his back, his hair longer, healthier, the sun hitting his skin in a way that made him look like someone I didn't know anymore. He looked happy, not distracting himself happy, not posting for my benefit happy, just free. And I hated how much that bothered me, because somewhere I had believed, maybe even needed to believe, that he would fall apart without me, that my absence would echo in his life like a haunting, that I mattered enough to break him. But he wasn't broken. He was better. I closed the app, sat in the dark, and let the silence stretch. Because if he could grow without me, if he could be happy without me, then what did that say about everything I'd told myself, about why I left, about what I thought I was worth? I used to think I was the reason he smiled the way he did, the reason he cared so deeply, loved so gently. Now he was giving that love to someone else, or maybe just back to himself. And for the first time, it felt like I was the one left behind.
Regret doesn't arrive like a thunderstorm. It trickles in like a leaking faucet, drip by drip, until one morning you realize the floor beneath you is soaked. It happened 3 months after I left. I wasn't looking for news about Michael. Not intentionally. I had trained myself not to. I no longer typed his name into search bars. I had blocked, unfollowed, archived. I had scrubbed him from my digital world like an exorcism. But life has its own algorithms. My mom brought it up, casually, like she was commenting on the weather. "I ran into Michael's mom at the store," she said, flipping through a stack of coupons. "She said he's doing well, started therapy, picked up his guitar again." I nodded, pretending to be indifferent. "That's good," I said. My voice sounded far away. But inside, something cracked. Started therapy? Picked up his guitar? When we were together, I'd begged him to be more independent, to have his own interests, to pursue his own healing. And now he was doing it. But not for me, not because I'd asked. He was doing it for himself. I should have been proud, relieved even, that he was finally building a self that didn't revolve around me. But instead I felt jealous, angry, like I'd been replaced as his reason to grow. Where was all this movement when I was still there? Where was this fire when I was pleading for something more than whatever you want, Zoe? Why now? I didn't say any of that aloud. I just smiled, nodded again, and went upstairs to stare at my bedroom ceiling for an hour, unmoving. Later that night, I looked him up. I told myself it was just curiosity, but we both know that's a lie. His account was still private, but the profile picture had changed. No longer a grainy sunset or abstract pattern. Now it was him, laughing, on a hiking trail, hair windblown, cheeks flushed, someone else's arm just barely visible in the frame. Someone else. The ache bloomed like bruises beneath my ribs. He was thriving, without me. It felt like a betrayal, as if his recovery proved I'd been the problem, like my absence was his freedom. And the worst part, I knew it was true. He had become the man I always said I wanted. and it made me sick. People say growth is beautiful, but they forget how ugly it feels when it doesn't include you. When the better version of someone is born from your leaving, not your love. When you realize you were the storm that pushed them into the sun, and now you're standing in the rain alone. I scrolled through what little I could see. A mention of an open mic night, a comment from someone named Emma, a teacher based on her bio. "You were incredible tonight," it read. I stared at that comment for longer than I cared to admit. It meant nothing, probably. Or maybe it meant everything. I shut off my phone, climbed into bed, lay awake for hours with the lights off, replaying conversations I hadn't thought about in months. The way his voice broke when I said I needed space, the sound of the suitcase zipper, the rustle of the note I left behind. Back then, I told myself I was letting him go for both of us. Now I wondered if I had only done it for me, and if he had finally learned to do something for himself. That night, for the first time since I left, I cried. Not the sharp, panicked sobbing of a breakup, not the quiet, leaking tears of sadness, but something deeper, thicker, older. A grief I hadn't earned and couldn't escape. Because I had asked for this, and now that it had arrived, I didn't know how to live with it.
It doesn't barge in like grief. It doesn't scream. Regret is quieter than that. It shows up in the empty spaces, in the in-between moments, in the silence between tasks, between heartbeats. It arrives while folding laundry. You reach for a sock, and for no reason at all, you remember how he used to pair them perfectly, toe to heel. You'd once teased him for being so particular. Now you stare at your mismatched pile and wonder how something so small could feel like loss. It arrives in the grocery store. You're standing in front of the tea section, eyes scanning the boxes without meaning to. And there it is, chamomile with honey and lemon. You pick it up, hold it for a second, put it back. It arrives in the morning. You wake up to sunlight hitting your pillow and realize there's no one to say good morning to, no one to kiss your forehead, no one humming badly in the kitchen. The silence isn't peaceful anymore. It's heavy. It arrives when your phone buzzes, and it's not him. Of course it's not. You told him not to call. You blocked his number. You severed every tie, thinking that would help, but now your phone is full of notifications from people who don't know you like he did. People who don't notice when your voice shakes or when your laugh isn't real. Michael noticed. Always. Regret doesn't ask for permission. It just settles in, unpacks its bags, makes itself at home. It sits beside you when you're eating alone. It whispers in your ear when you're scrolling through your feed. It waits patiently until you've convinced yourself you're fine. And then it shows you something small. A guitar pick, a photo memory, a smell. And suddenly, you're not fine. I used to think missing someone was loud, that it came with tears and longing and late-night texts. But missing Michael was like background noise I couldn't turn off. I tried to bury it with work, with wine, with new hobbies I didn't care about, and dates with men I didn't like. I downloaded an app, swiped, matched, chatted, met a guy named Trevor who wore expensive cologne and talked about real estate investments. We had dinner once. He didn't ask how my day was. He didn't notice I wasn't eating. And when he walked me to my car, he didn't wait to see if I got in safely. Michael always waited. Trevor texted the next morning, "Had fun, you're hot, let's do it again." I blocked him. Not because he was awful, but because he made me realize what I'd given up. Not a boyfriend, not a roommate, not a man who made tea. A witness. Someone who saw me, all of me, and stayed anyway. You don't get many of those in a lifetime. And when you lose them, they don't haunt you like ghosts. They haunt you like echoes. In all the places you didn't think they touched until they're gone and everything is quieter than it should be.
I don't know why I started writing it. Maybe it was after seeing the hiking photo. Maybe it was after I ran into someone who looked like you in the bookstore and my heart stuttered for no reason at all. Maybe it was after I realized it had been 6 months and I still knew exactly how you took your coffee. But one night, I opened my journal, the one with the leather cover and the broken spine, and I wrote, "Dear Michael, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if I want you to. But I need to say things I never said when it mattered." And then the words spilled out. I told you how sorry I was for turning your kindness into a burden, for taking the softness of your heart and calling it weakness, for shaping you into a version of yourself that I no longer respected and blaming you for becoming it. I told you I was scared of how deeply you loved me, scared that it meant I had to love you just as fully, and I didn't trust myself to be capable of that. I admitted that I left not because of anything you lacked, but because I was lacking the maturity to hold what you offered me. You handed me safety, and I mistook it for boredom. You gave me devotion, and I called it dependence. You listened when I was silent, and I resented you for hearing things I hadn't yet said aloud. You were always braver than me, Michael. You showed up fully. I never did. I wrote about the nights I still wake up thinking I heard your keys at the door, about how I pause sometimes in restaurants when a song plays, one you used to hum without thinking, about how no one since you has looked me in the eye and seen me, not the curated version, not the polished one, just me. I used to think love had to be hard to mean something. Now I know the rarest kind of love is the one that never made me beg for attention. The one that showed up with tea, not flowers. With a dish towel, not grand speeches. With steady hands, not shaking ones. I told you I had been trying to reinvent myself, that I thought leaving was a beginning. But sometimes it feels like all I really did was start a very long ending. And still, I didn't mail it. I folded the letter, slid it into the back of the journal, closed it slowly, like sealing a wound that might never quite heal. I imagined you, maybe in a warm kitchen, guitar on your lap, someone new laughing beside you. Someone who never made you feel like you had to shrink to be loved. Someone who looks at you and says, "Don't ever change," and means it. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't writing to get you back. I was writing because some confessions aren't meant for reconciliation. They're meant for reckoning. This letter wasn't a bridge back to you. It was a tombstone over the version of myself that couldn't hold the good thing she had. I hope you're happy, Michael. I hope you kept the tea mug. I hope you hum when you wash dishes. I hope you never feel small again.
Time doesn't heal everything, but it does remove the illusions. At 28, I don't pretend to know what love should look like anymore. Not the kind that burns fast and bright. Not the kind that posts poetic captions or comes with grand surprises. I've learned that the love that lasts, the kind that builds a life, isn't loud. It's slow, intentional. It's someone remembering your allergies. It's someone folding your towel the way you like it. It's someone listening, really listening, when you sigh and say, "I'm fine." Michael loved like that, and I didn't know how to receive it. I was too busy searching for something shinier, louder, something that made me feel important instead of something that made me feel safe. I mistook quiet for dullness. I mistook ease for lack of depth. I thought love had to be complicated to be real. But Michael, he made love look simple. And that terrified me. Because if it was that simple, if it was that right, then all the chaos I carried inside me couldn't survive in it. and I wasn't ready to let it go. So I left. I didn't say I'm scared. I didn't say I don't feel worthy of this. I said I need to find myself. And maybe I did, but at what cost? Because now I walk through a life filled with versions of what could have been. I see men who are confident, clever, charming, but who don't remember what kind of tea I like, who don't know the way I rub the bridge of my nose when I'm overwhelmed, who don't see me in the quiet ways Michael did. And I know it's not their fault. It's mine. What I know now is this: love isn't proven in conflict or tested by distance. It's proven in how someone stays, how they stand beside you when you're not easy to love, how they soften instead of harden, how they never make you feel like you're too much or not enough. Michael was that kind of person, and I threw him away like he was replaceable. He wasn't. People talk about soulmates like they're perfect matches. I don't think that's true. I think a soulmate is someone who mirrors back the version of you that is kind and patient and whole. And if you're not ready to be that person, you push them away. What I know now? Michael was my mirror, and I smashed it.
I didn't mean to see it. I wasn't looking. But that's how life punishes you, I think. Not with cruelty, but with coincidence. It was a Wednesday, late afternoon. I had just finished a meeting that ran too long and meant too little. I was scrolling without thinking, thumbing through stories like the distraction might dull the ache of another ordinary day. And there it was. A white suit, a soft bouquet, a caption. He asked. I said yes. Can't wait to marry my best friend, Emma. Emma, the name I'd seen before, in comments, on tags. A shadow I hadn't dared to name. Now she had a face. A smile that looked honest. Grateful. Not demanding, not skeptical. Just sure. I clicked through the album. Michael looked radiant. Not handsome. Radiant. That kind of peace you only wear when you're no longer trying to be someone else's version of yourself. In one photo, he's laughing, head tilted back, arm around her shoulders. His smile isn't cautious like it used to be with me. It's wide open, trusting. In another, they're dancing, her head on his chest, his hand resting on the small of her back, like home, like he's finally allowed to be. And then I see them with his family. His mother hugging Emma like she's been waiting her whole life to meet her. His father raising a glass. His friends, the ones I always thought were immature, all there, looking older, happier, complete. There was no room for me in that picture. Not even in the edges. Not even as a shadow. I sat there staring at that photo for hours because that was my life. Or it could have been. Should have been. The man in that photo was the man I'd asked him to become. Assertive, grounded, still kind, but not afraid to take up space. The man I claimed to want, but abandoned before he could ever become. And Emma? She met him where he was and let him grow in the light, not under pressure. She didn't try to mold him. She trusted him, and that trust made all the difference. It hit me then. She hadn't stolen him. I gave him away, piece by piece, with every eye roll, every small criticism, every silent moment where I could have said, I see you, and didn't. Now someone else does. And she gets the version of him I couldn't wait for, couldn't nurture, couldn't believe in. There are no do-overs for people like Michael. Once they learn how to protect their heart, they never hand it back to the person who broke it. And they shouldn't. So I closed my phone, put it face down on the counter, and I sat in the stillness. Not as punishment, not as penance, but because some silences deserve to be felt, all the way through.
If you're listening to this and you're still with someone who shows up for you, someone who folds your laundry the right way, remembers your favorite tea, asks how you are, and waits for the real answer, hold them tighter. Don't wait until they stop asking. Don't wait until their softness hardens. Because quiet love isn't boring. It's brave. It's rare. And if you're not careful, you might only recognize it when it's smiling in someone else's wedding photo.